industrial uses, and we are mentioned in this hierarchy here in rendering. And what we do is very important in reduction of food waste. The estimates are anywhere from 30 to 50% food wasted in developing countries, and that's way too much. And so a lot of what we do and in our business is we are the #1 industry for food waste reduction and food loss prevention. So sustainable goals for the UN, as you can see here, we match up with many, I think 12 of the 17 UN sustainable goals. So we're aligned very well for sustainability. About 50% of the animal isn't consumed by humans, at least in developed countries. And then we have 1.92 billion pounds of grocery outdated meats and things like that picked up from grocery stores. Here's a big one. We make water. That's what one of our members said. We take water from these tissues, which are about 70% moisture, and we clean that water and put it back in the environment as a clean source. And there's not many industries can say they make clean water, but we do a good job making clean water. And it's very important for our businesses. And then about just shy of 5 billion pounds of used cooking oil. Those numbers go up every day, and it's a very important recycling. We need to avoid waste and reduce landfill inputs. If we look at, we collect over 56 billion pounds a year. If we did not do our collection in as little time as 4 years, every landfill in existence would be full. I think that time's actually shorter than that, but that's a back of the napkin kind of estimate. But we'd also, these are from my friends in Brazil with ABRA, we'd have to build 920 new sanitary landfills in Brazil alone just to handle what renderers pick up on an annual basis. And that's a big number, and we don't have room for these new landfills. Again, water, 50 to 90% of water comes out of our materials. We reclaim it, we clean it, we recycle it. It develops over 4 billion gallons of clean water we put back into the environment for use. And then greenhouse gas. Rendering for animal proteins and animal tissues, rendering is the primary choice. Composting works great with plant materials, but composting actually releases more greenhouse gas, especially some sulfides, and that's dangerous to the environment, and it could be potentially dangerous to humans. So we reduce emissions by 72%, fossil fuel use by 80%. You guys as renderers have developed and cleaned your products up, so the renewable fuel industry really likes them as a feedstock. You worked hard on those relationships and built those businesses, and so we're really reducing the use of petroleum. We sequester 5 times more greenhouse gas emissions from the environment, and then we avoid about 90% of greenhouse gas emissions when compared to composting. Composting is not a solution for animal proteins. It's great for plant products and some other things, paper, etc. It does not work for animal proteins. Fertilizer savings. By using render products in feed, it supplies a lot of calcium and phosphorus that the animal needs. This reduces the need for taking non-arable land and putting poor land in crop production. It also reduces the need to about 650,000 tons of dicalcium phosphate would be needed to supply the same plant material to feed those animals for the nutrients that we're supplying through our render products. So we have a very nice place in the biocircular economy, and it works really well. And we don't really compete with food. There's some things going on out there about how, competing with pet food, and I'll talk a little more about that in a minute. But we don't compete with food, and if we look at carbon footprint for fats and oils, palm oil is very high, food grade fats intermediate, but we look at poultry, porcine, mixed species, same thing for our meals. Soybean meals very high, and processed animal proteins have very low carbon footprint. Now I'm going to talk about some myths that we need to combat during this presentation, and we need to remember the reason soybean meal is high here is land use. That's what really gets them. And that's probably not fair as you go from country to country, region to region. It's not good to go cut forests down to try to raise soybeans on poor soil. But if you've got a good prairie land that's arable, good for crop production, that soybean meal shouldn't get knocked the same as deforestation grown soybean meal. A couple more things. One Health, most of you probably heard of this by now. If not, you should look it up. It's going to be driving a lot of the things we do. It's an interrelationship between human health, animal health, and even wildlife and environment. And that's why things like reclaiming all that water and cooking our products so we eliminate potential pathogens that could be out and be a public health risk is so important. And that's part of the reason why you guys need to be so proud of what you do. We look at individual health, population health, ecosystem health, and renderers have a position to play in all of those areas, and we do a great job of that. We reduce zoonotic infections, we reduce pathogens, we clean up the environment, we put new clean water back into the environment, and all of that is helpful. But we get into some myths, and we've been dinged in agriculture for a long time by this publication. I don't know how many of you have seen this publication. You see they have a cow on it, because now cows are bad, they say. That's not true. I'm hearing having conversations with pet food nutritionists saying tallow's bad, beef products are bad to use in our pet food. That's not an accurate assessment. If we're deforesting land that is poor soil, does not grow good grass, to make new grazing land, that is not a good, sustainable environmental use of that land. But when we're using prairie grass and grazing cattle and doing circular grazing systems so we protect the environment, there's nothing wrong with that beef. And rendered products are safe, effective, and sustainable to use in pet food. But we have these consultants from urban areas, big companies, maybe McKinsey might be a name that goes around, that come into places and they think they know our industry. And they say, oh, beef's bad because somebody said that cow gas is destroying the environment. That's silly, and we have to separate those two things. We can't go deforest land to poor land to raise cattle, but raising cattle in an environmentally sustainable way with circular grazing systems and things like that, that's extremely sustainable. And we need to make sure everybody's separating those two myths apart from each other. So the good news is we can stop this over time. But these myths have led to repercussions recently, and you guys have all seen the news in Europe about what's going on over there with the farmer protest. This is, I think, Holland, but it's happening in country after country after country after country. They're dumping manure in Paris at Parliament. That's what publications like Livestock's Long Shadow led to. Green New rules that are going into effect in the EU this year led to these protests. They told you can't raise cattle anymore. Or if you have 100 cattle, now you can only raise 15. That's what's led to these issues. And it's based on a myth. It's based on bad calculations. There is hope. For the first time ever last year, FAO had a Sustainable Livestock Transformation Conference. Let me repeat that, for the first time last year. They've been around a long time, and nobody ever thought livestock was sustainable or we needed to have a Congress on this. And my colleague Dana and our colleague from Brazil, Lucas, attended this, and it's all about recognizing, hey, livestock is sustainable if we do it correctly. It's not, again, deforestation doesn't help, but circular grazing, advanced production systems, all that are efficiencies, and we achieve sustainability through these efficiencies that we apply to our production systems. So there's hope, and things are getting better. And finally, rendering fits well in a circular bioeconomy. We take byproducts, we cook them, we put them into things like renewable fuels, oleochemical industries, feedstuffs. Pet food takes it out of circularity, but typically feedstuffs, we go right back in. Fertilizers would be another good example. We can apply our products and grow new crops or new grass to feed other animals. So it's a complete circular bioeconomic system. We see again, you know, biofuels are very important to us. They're very sustainable. We have another circular biosystem here where we're talking about renewable fuel sources. This is the same carbon footprint. We score very well in the carbon footprint overall. But we got another myth out there that keeps going around about food versus fuel. We are stealing fats from pet food. That's not true, and we have to stop this. This is not happening.
Maybe if you just
and we like dogs.
stay
You'll
here.
see some pictures in a minute. I own 7, and we like to have dogs. But when we look at Renewable Energy Directive, this is EU numbers. Waste vegetable or animal biodiesel is 83% greenhouse gas emission savings. If we look at data here, I think this is a little older from 22. This is from CARB, the California Air Resource Board. Singapore, this amazes me. We take used cooking oil, ship it from the US to Singapore, they convert it into biodiesel, ship it back to California, and it's still the lowest scoring number on the board. That's how good and how efficient and how sustainable our products are and how they play in this biocircular economy. But if we look at total use of fats, and this is brand new data, 23, about 7% of poultry fat. Tallow has made a big jump. It's a preferred feedstock for renewable fuel. It's made a huge jump. It went from about 43%, it's up to 67% this year. White grease dropped just a little bit down to 37, but we're talking about 50% total of the fat market. So there's plenty of fat out there for pet food. And don't ever let them forget, they're add our fats because they're palatants. They don't add them for energy, otherwise they could use palm oil or soy oil. They are buying a palatant from you at a very, very low price. We need to not let them forget that. But we are not stealing fats from pet food. We only send the highest quality fats to pet and livestock feeds and oleochemical, and we still have plenty, and you've seen the growth in biofuel. If we look at meals, here we have about 24% goes to pet food, 51% poultry, 33% total. So there's a lot of meals still on the market. We aren't taking anything away from pet food in our business. So I get up, and being a scientist, I tend to do a lot of whining and complaining and say, oh, these are our problems and we have to fix them. And my favorite president's Teddy Roosevelt. And if you're whining without providing a solution, or if you're complaining without providing a solution, you're just whining. And we've got to fix that. So where are we going as NARA and the rendering industry as a whole in cooperative ways to advance our goals, to talk to people about how sustainable we are and the benefits of our industry? I would encourage all of you, if you have an opportunity, if you're going to Pet Food Forum in Kansas City, join Pet Food Alliance. This is a group that has gotten together on a volunteer basis from pet food industry, renderers, and some packers, and we sit at a table and we use scientific methods to solve problems that are affecting our industry and our trade and our business. Oxidative stability. We did a huge ring study through Pet Food Alliance to determine better methodologies to measure peroxide value. And we talked, Julieta talked about amines and aldehydes yesterday. That project's being worked on as well. Another one is food safety from a pathogen standpoint. How do we improve that? What mitigants work for palatability of pets and for safety of product? And then we have a sustainability committee with this group. So I would encourage all of you, if you have an opportunity, it starts the Wednesday that Pet Food Forum ends, and will continue through a little afternoon that Thursday. Please join us. It's open. We're there for dialogue, and we're working with our customers and our friends and our business partners to solve these problems using scientific manner. Fats and Proteins Research Foundation. I'm the director of this, and we do research that has to do with economic sustainability, trying to improve and increase markets. A lot of that has to do with food safety and quality work. And then supportive safety information, stability, trade, international trade can be difficult sometimes because everybody's concerned, especially with all the emerging diseases going on. So we're working on projects to establish the safety of these products. But any member can join. You don't have to be a member of NARA to join FPRF, but we're trying to do research. If you have researchers, we're always looking for proposals. We have 2 calls, one in the spring and one in the fall. Just go to the website and we're looking for proposals all the time. And then we're working on some new concepts as well. Looking at product shift. We don't have to continue doing things the same way over and over and over. There's some new areas coming in that work, especially with the energy reduction and the side of sustainability that are very important to what we do. I'll mention food waste again, and then looking at sustainability overall. Product flexibility. What are we doing with product flexibility? Wet pet has become very, very important in our industry. And many renderers are doing wet pet products along with dry meals. Wet pet takes less energy input, so it could even potentially have a higher LCA or CI score and give you even more of an advantage on sustainable calculations. I love this. If you don't go to the pet food store at least twice a year and just wander around, you'll be amazed at what you see on the shelves. Dr. Miguel is in the business. He knows all about all this stuff, but it's amazing the changes in the industry. And these are toppers. They're sold and look just like human food products. You can spray peanut butter on your dog food, but it's all about palatability.
It's one of mine.
Well, what did we talk about earlier?
Yes, take it from
There's a reason we don't use soy oil in pet food. It's because we're selling them palatants when we talk about poultry oil and tallow and choice white grease. Food waste, everybody's talking about it. Everybody's getting involved. We are the #1 industry in reduction of food waste. Don't let anybody tell you different. We are #1. And taking products from a renderer and putting it in a compost pile doesn't get you anywhere. It's actually moving backwards because you're releasing more greenhouse gases. And there's been a few initiatives in the US trying to do that, and we're working hard against that because we do a great job and we repurpose and recycle these for higher level uses and higher value uses. Fertilizer's great. I'm not against compost and fertilizer, but oleochemical, renewable fuels, those have an added advantage. So that's where we're going with a lot of the food waste issue. And I encourage my members, if you're picking up at grocery stores and butcher shops, and you've got a footprint and some land, maybe you need to look in collecting plant material. Composting goes hand in hand with rendering. They work great together, and each excels in reduction of greenhouse gases as long as you put the right raw materials in each place. Aquaculture, this is one of my favorite biocircular stories. So we can use rendered products, ship them to Ecuador, feed shrimp, the shrimp come back up to the US, and I get to go out and have a shrimp cocktail at night. So we are feeding the economy, we're feeding humans. Rendered products can produce more protein that can go to feed humans in challenged areas where protein's at risk. And aquaculture is a great way to do that because if you're anywhere near a waterway, you know, we can feed fish, we can feed shrimp. The technologies in aquaculture have grown. So if we look at production, wild capture is flatlined, you all know this. Aquaculture continues to increase. It's growing and it's growing, and it's not looking like it's going to stop. We have a 19% decrease in fish meal production because we've overfished in some areas and there's limits on allowed fishing now. But we have almost a 500% increase in aquaculture production. So how are we going to feed those animals? And Dr. Viana is working very hard on that. She talked about some things, really good work she did yesterday with rendered products, but also imports are increasing. We are increasing our exports of rendered proteins to go into aquaculture feeds. in Mexico, in Ecuador, in Asia. And they're great sources. It took us a few years to figure out how to substitute correctly, and we're still doing hard work on that with Dr. Viana and others. But we've finally figured out how can we replace fish meal in these aquaculture diets, keep efficient production, and keep this circular bioeconomy and sustainability effort going forward. And so we're doing a better job of that now. And this is some data on aquaculture. This is new data that we're getting ready to publish. And I put this slide first because this is soy. And this is part of what really stands out. This is land use, and you see how different and how far away soy is on land use. That's why they get knocked in their LCA scores. They're working on that. That's probably needs to be more regionally calculated. It's not correct overall, but it is correct if you're knocking trees down to try to grow soy. So all of our byproducts are down here. So if we look at land use, we score very well in comparison. This is some data on amino acids. So we formulated diets with and without rendered animal proteins, and we looked at the contribution to greenhouse gas production that was provided for the amino acid nutrient need of those aquaculture species. And this one is, actually should be all of them together. But if you go across the list, I know this is small, I apologize, but we look at soybean meal over here. All the byproducts are here in the middle. They're very low on emission of greenhouse gas to achieve the same lysine. Now again, that knocks is because of the land use, but that's kind of where we sit. So we have a sustainability story, and your customers are probably asking you about it. And you should be using data like these to sell your product to pet food and aquaculture, because you're going to help them achieve their carbon reduction goals. And they'll do it on our backs. And they can get there faster and more quickly and get larger reductions by utilizing rendered products. The same thing here with greenhouse gas emission intensity, looking at different feed ingredients. This one's gelatin. It's the highest, because it undergoes so much additional processing. It's really tough. Soybean meal's over here again because of land use. But all of your animal proteins, processed animal proteins, are down here. So we score very, very well against other ingredients overall. I know this is a lot of data. I don't expect you to read it. They've got the slides will be posted, but what I thought was interesting, when we looked at rendered products on sustainability and reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, all of these changes are negative. We are reducing in almost every sense when we switch and utilize rendered proteins to supply these amino acids. This is a total aquaculture as well, and in each case, so when we studied the scenario with rendered proteins, that's the orange bars are the rendered proteins. The blue bars are a traditional diet with fish meal and our plant proteins. We saw a reduction for every amino acid when we started including rendered proteins in these diets. And so it does add up, it makes a difference, and you can see the shift in the ingredients between the two diets. Plant proteins reduced, grains reduced, animal proteins increased, and that's how we achieve those reductions in greenhouse gas emissions based on that earlier data. And then we're looking at intensity. So this is similar to the other map, but gelatin and fish are the most intense. They're the ones over on the left. And then all of the rendered products are over here. So we score well on greenhouse gas emission intensity time and time and time again. More data looking at corresponding, this is volume of ingredients utilized. You can see soy over here on the right. Fish is the large ball up here at the top. It doesn't score well. We got to stop using fish to feed fish. We're going to overfish and overharvest from our fisheries. Shrimp byproduct meal is pretty high too, but animal proteins, again, it's the lowest greenhouse gas per metric ton of ingredient. And then we see similar things when we look at plant proteins versus fish meal. Fish meal's high. Wheat wheat's actually, or soy protein concentrate's very high, but other animal proteins, poultry byproduct meal, et cetera, are all very low on greenhouse gas emissions. Same trend here for the same issue. Soy's on the right, the big brown sphere is gelatin again. Gelatin for shrimp is very, very high in greenhouse gas emission because of the additional process it goes through. Again, this is a greenhouse gas looking at shrimp again. Diets, it follows the same exact trend over and over and over. So what about pet food? What about food versus fuel? I already told you we love pets. I've got 7 dogs at home. But we do the same trend in pet food. And I know from Dr. Miguel that you're already getting asked questions about sustainability of your products here. In Mexico, Central America, we are getting asked the same in North America. That's very, very important to pet food, because the Walmarts and the Costcos are telling all of their suppliers, they went in public and said, we're going to get a X reduction, 30% reduction. We're going to go target net zero by 2050, whatever. They've made these claims and now they have to fulfill them. You guys are going to play a very important role in how those claims get fulfilled because of the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. And this is what you can do for pet food customers. Lamb, beef, cheese, fish, all of this over here on the left are very, very high in greenhouse gas emission intensity. If we look at render proteins, they're all over here. That's a huge difference. Those are the calculations you can use to show your customer and help them achieve their reduction goals that they're in claims. Similar trend of the aquaculture, but this is regarding pet food. So we have, again, the basic premise of this is food ingredients corresponding greenhouse gas emission intensity, metric tons per of ingredient. All of the rendered animal proteins stay down here in slide after slide after slide. Similar trend here. Milk, corn gluten meal, some other products are much higher. All of the animal proteins are in the lower left corner. Similar trend here. This is land use again. You can see the issues with land use when we get into plant proteins, grains, byproducts are over here. Greenhouse gas emissions, these are scenarios for dogs. And if we looked at animal-based meals versus plant-based meals, the dog diets, we see a huge difference here. Plant-based has higher emissions than animal-based meals. Land use again by species, this is all different species. If we look at the grains are in the blue, plant proteins are the orange, animal proteins, which you can't hardly see on some of these bars, are in this gray, but this is the land use charge to the different plant grains, proteins versus animal protein contribution to feed for all these species. So we can help you and help your customer achieve these goals by sharing this sustainability data with them. More science that we're working on, life cycle assessments are expected. I don't know how many of you have already done an LCA analysis. A lot of you done carbon intensity score if you're doing biofuel, but you're going to get asked to do LCA analysis. And you'll get asked some of these sustainability audits, you'll get asked things like, do you chain your employees up at night? And that's legitimate. And what's sad is apparently that happens somewhere. But don't ever forget about the social aspect of sustainability. What does it mean to your brand to be sustainable? What does it mean to your customer's brand and helping them achieve their reduction goals? Everything is changing and we have to stay in tune with this. So FAO has started the LEAP initiative, which is Livestock Environmental Assessment and Performance Guidelines. We're in step 1, calculate your LCA, get that number now. Step 2 is going to be, what have you done for me lately? What's your reduction this year? What's your reduction the following year? So phase 1, we're working on this. And if you aren't aware of GFLI, you need to make sure that yourself and your nutritionist are, because it's a database that is being used by nutritionists to put an LCA score to every ingredient. And in North America, we're working on a project to get all of our regional ingredients put into the GFLI database. Our colleagues in Europe did it last year. They've got a bunch of great numbers in there. Spent a lot of time and effort on that work. But we're going to start formulating with a carbon score attached to each ingredient. And we have a member who had an ingredient kicked out of a pet food diet because there was a bad carbon score actually in that database where they got the number. Now they've got a good carbon score. They did the work. They got that changed. Now it's okay, but we have to do this. GFLI is independent. It's industry driven. It is going to be the database used by LEAP. It's approved by EU. So it is where we're going with nutrition. And it's not any different than what we do normally formulating. It's just adding that carbon score and targeting what do you want the carbon score of that diet to be. So with that, I want to thank you again. Excuse me. Thank you again for what you do and for your attendance here, and I'll take any questions.